Welcome to the Prepared Mind channel. We've got an excellent multi-part discussion with Dr. Jim Willie of www.golden-jackass.com. We cover a multitude of topics that have everything to do with shit hitting the fan, the system coming apart, what is going on with banking, finance, military efforts, what's going to happen here domestically in the United States as well as around the world. So stay tuned for all three parts. You will enjoy it. Thank you again for your support here and for continuing, to encourage our efforts to get the news out, opinion out, the truth out, so that people know it is time to get prepared, because we've got some serious emergencies that are going to be coming. Serious shit hitting the fan. And it's not far off in the future. So enjoy what Jim has to talk about with me, and we'll see you for the next couple of days as we continue through this marathon discussion that Jim and I had. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. I've got an extremely special guest here today. I've got Jim Willie of www.golden-jackass.com. Jim is an icon in the world of what the fuck is going on when it comes to gold, politics, international geopolitics. He's just got a plethora of things to discuss, and I'm really excited to have him here. Jim, welcome to the Prepared Mind channel.
Well, it's a pleasure being on. This is the first time, and I like new blood. I really do. Some people tell me, "Oh, Jim, don't bother with." No. I like being on shows. I like spreading the word, and my view is it's a different audience, it's a different cross section, and you never know what kind of exposure it'll be. It could be very instructive and edifying to your crowd. I don't really know exactly what your crowd is, but might not be a whole lot of overlap with some of my past. And that's great, because we are in crisis mode.
Crisis mode is a good way to put it.
This is what I call the systemic layman moment. And the moment has begun, John.
Can you describe the layman moment, and then we'll get into subjects like Deutsche Bank and oil and gold?
Sure.
Okay.
After Lehman hit, and I got to give you a little preliminary on Lehman. Lehman hit in September 2008, and in August, I gave a preview that Lehman was going to fail, and so would Fannie Mae. I gave that a couple months in advance. I said Lehman was in trouble a year before it failed. I watched its credit default swap, which is an insurance policy on its corporate bond. But history needs to enter some very important logs. 2 years before Lehman failed, the Chinese announced that they were going to focus on treasuries. In other words, they were going to dump Fannie Mae bonds. The Chinese started the Fannie Mae breakdown and the Lehman collapse. They said they're going to focus on treasury bonds. Okay, let's just leave that all alone. After Lehman, the Fed and the U.S. government, they engaged in some serious criminal activity. The Wall Street banks stole the $700 billion TARP fund. It was specifically designed by the Congress for lending capital to keep the U.S. economy moving. It was specifically blocked to the U.S. economy, what they call Main Street. Instead, it went to buy and invest in Wall Street preferred stock. In other words, it bailed out the owners of the Wall Street banks. The owner, not the bank. It bailed out the owners of the Wall Street banks, the executives who own the preferred stock. Preferred stock is like a standard stock, except it has a huge dividend. Okay, so that's what the owners own. So they get a dividend and have a huge allowance each month on their millions of shares. Okay, so they stole the TARP fund, and What did we do after that? I immediately changed I made a forecast. I said, we're going down to 0%. We're going to follow the Japanese model. And of course, a lot of people said, Jim, what a stupid thing to say. United States will never stoop that low. And I said, you have no idea the depth of the problem. A year later, I said, we're going to have an annual $1 trillion deficit. Of course, I was called stupid again. I said, you just wait and watch and be careful not to swallow all the pro forma nonsensical accounting. Like, for instance, 2 years ago, they said we had a $550 billion deficit for the year, and in actuality, it was closer to $900 billion. This year, we're on track for $1.4 trillion. Did I say billion? I meant trillion.
Trillion.
We're going to say that it's 650, 700 billion, and it's going to be 1.3, 1.4 trillion. That's because they got a lot of one-off items. Like, oh my gosh, we can't count that, but we helped out Citibank with a bunch of things, and we had some fire rescue California, and those are all one-off items. Yeah, of course it's $100 billion, but we don't count that in the deficit. Well, I do. What I do is I do something real simple, John. I say, what was the deficit a year ago? No, sorry, what was the total debt a year ago? What's the total debt now, a year later? Let me subtract the two. Do you mind if I subtract the two to come up with the answer?
That's easy math when you do it that way.
Easy math. You don't even need a napkin. You can do that in your head. Okay.
Right.
So what did the U.S. do after Lehman? We did all the wrong things. We allowed poor underwriting of bonds. We allowed the U.S. bond issuers, the corporate bonds that were issued in the bond market. We allowed them to abuse the funds and do stock buybacks. We allowed them to pad the executive compensation packages with stock options and various things. And the major buyer for the stock market among the S&P 500 companies was the companies themselves, abusing their corporate bond issuance and buying their own stock. We did all the wrong things, and we did it on a national scale with respect to the treasuries. So what I call now, John, is the treasury bond is the new global subprime bond.
Yeah.
About 70% of its purchases is done with derivative machinery. The primary bond dealers are loaded to the gills and cannot sell. By that, I mean the primary bond dealers who have treasury bond cannot find, legitimate, respectable, honorable, standard, regular buyers of bonds. So they're stuck with it. And they end up using the back door at the Fed and the Wall Street banks with hidden QE, quantitative easing, otherwise known as hyper monetary inflation of the worst kind, since it's unsterilized. Exactly, unsterilized. For people who don't know this term, in the past, like 20 years ago, the Fed would buy a bunch of bonds, but they would drain an equal amount out of the banking system. Now they don't do that anymore. It's all unsterilized. If they drain, it's sterilized, which means there's no net positive to the money supply. We've got a tripling or quadrupling in the money supply since 2005, 6, 7. Right. Usually that means the gold price triples or quadruples at the same time, but they prevented that to happen. And I think we're going to get the quantum jump of a tripled gold price. I don't know the time frame. If it's more than a couple of years, it'd be a miracle because we can't contain this.
Right.
The bond market is in a crisis mode right now. It's from overuse and abuse of the derivative machinery, in particular the interest rate swap derivative. What they do is they do arbitrage of the short-term rates and long-term rates, coupon versus non-coupon. Gets very complex. And with this nearly free feeder system, well, it's not free anymore after the interest rate hikes.
Right.
But for a few years, it was free feeder system. With this free feeder, I'm talking in the past, but we're going to return to the past. With this free feeder system, they would take the differential off free money and actual bond market yield, and they would create a fabricated demand for a treasury bond. And that's how we have been funding the deficit in the form of treasury bonds, securitized bonds. We've been using derivative machinery, I think, to purchase at least 70% of our debt. This is, I call it Zimbabwe style, and I got some complaints from a certain certain group of clients, and they were saying, well, Jim, South America used to do the same thing. Okay, Zimbabwe / South America style. We're buying our own debt, and we're concealing that in order to prevent 10% interest rates in the United States. We deserve 15% interest rates.
Right.
We're worse than Greece ever was.
But it's
Greece never, pardon me?
It's all kind of hidden for now.
It is.
For now.
But Trump let the cat out of the bag. About 3 months ago, he announced that we're going to keep, we're not, well, he said, they didn't say it. He said, we're not going to return $3 trillion of Saudi treasuries.
Yeah.
Saudi-owned U.S. treasuries in the Wall Street banking system. We're not going to return that. We're going to hold it. He made it sound like, in order to save the world.
Right.
In order to preserve the system. In order to continue in the current financial structure. Okay? That's the framework. Okay? Okay, let's interpret it in reality terms.
Right, please.
We had a 1973 petro-recycle deal. It later was called the de facto petrodollar system standard. I call it a standard because it is a fixed system that has endured. I got into an argument with Bill Engdahl at a German conference, and it was really kind of silly because it was a waste of 15 minutes. We could have talked about something useful. He said, Jim, it's not a standard. And I said, what de facto standard? He said, it's not a standard. I said, well, then it's a practice that endures. And he said, right. Yeah, but it's not a standard. I said, can we talk about something else? And finally I said, look, okay, nice meeting you, Bill. I walked away. He wouldn't get off that. It's a de facto standard.
Yes.
It means the Saudis and their entire OPEC following, including the Gulf Emirates, monarchies, they sold oil, took dollars, and recycled surplus in treasuries, and it never left the dollar. Okay, that's a de facto petrodollar standard. Okay, what's the main point here? I got off. Oh yeah, the Saudis, I believe, were told that 1 out of every $2 or 1 out of every $3. We don't know. We don't know what Kissinger's deal was.
But there was a deal.
There was a deal. And I think it was to retain perhaps as much as a third or more. And it would be held in the United States banks. It'll be used to keep the whole structure sound and stable and corrupt as hell.
But it was kind of sequestered into a private account and held there for later use. Is that what we've got, Jim?
Well, private account, but under the Department of Treasury aegis.
Okay.
And I think it was used for the Department of Treasury's Exchange Stabilization Fund.
Yeah.
And there's a big debate now, how much is in that fund? What is the core? Because it's used to manage the stock market, the bond market, the LIBOR market, European stocks, STOXX, the FTSE, the Financial Times, London stock market. It's used to manage about 5 or 7 major financial markets. In other words, it's used to corrupt and rig them. Notice all the rigging in the LIBOR market in the last 3 years and claims of trillion-dollar losses and impact and lawsuits that get settled privately in order to keep it all shoved under the carpet. This is all consequence of rigged markets from the Department of Treasury's ESF, Exchange Stabilization Fund. Okay, the point is that the Saudis, I think, were ordered, if you want this deal, fine, you're going to get triple, quadruple the oil price, you're going to have incredible wealth for your royal kingdom, and they blew it all. They're broke. They're broke. They were told you got to buy a bunch of U.S. weapons because, we got to make war. You got to feed it back into the military complex. Okay, so anyway, I believe Trump let the cat out of the bag and talked about what is easily inferred as seeding and feeding and preserving the exchange stabilization fund with Saudi bonds, Saudi treasury bonds. Okay. We've got a bond market crisis that cannot be stopped. The only debate is which of 5 triggers will light the fuse. That's a mixed metaphor. Which of the 5 triggers will start this thing into a conflagration?
Right. The dominoes.
The domino effect. Which fuse will be lit? And in the last, pardon me?
Is it going to be D-Bank or is it going to be, what's your pick, Jim? What's your best guess?
My best guess is it's going to be 2 or 3 simultaneously out of potential 6. They're all really erupting at the same time. Now look at it this way. If you've got several eruption locations, just think of, say, Yellowstone. Mm-hmm. And you could have 3 different areas where a volcanic eruption could occur because it's 150 miles in diameter. Okay, if you've got several different eruption potential zones and you're doing all kinds of machinations and extraordinary efforts to prevent the eruption, then doesn't it make sense that they're all at risk at the same time after a period of time passes? Okay, whether it's the mud bowl or the actual little mountain, Mount Yellowstone, or the other corner that's always rumbling. We've got several areas that are always rumbling and always requiring very delicate but profound attention. And you can't say, well, all these are under control and that's not. Oh, no, they're all not under control. And they're all at the point of eruption. And let me just list what some of them are.
Please.
Deutsche Bank, tremendous derivative failure site related to their bankers' trust forced adoption in '98. It was called the Fed's Bank in '98, the nickname. In other words, it was their toxic silo of derivatives that nobody paid any attention to. Right. But then the regulatory bodies did pay attention. They said, okay, we need to ship this out of the US, out of the regulatory view. And Deutsche Bank didn't start paying attention to what was under their roof until they had a BaFin, B-A-F-I-N. It's a combination of FDIC and Securities Exchange Commission. BaFin took a close look I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, to do an audit. What do we got here? What is this swill? And they walked away. I'm not making this up, John. They walked away in utter horror and shock at what they saw in their derivative book.
Wow.
And they've reduced their estimates. I think it's just propaganda bull, but they say they got 47 trillion euros. Okay. Way back, BaFin said, well, we got close to 100 trillion euros. Yeah. What do? Do they really get rid of a bunch of it, or did they declassify it, or did they move it off balance sheet? They did all the above.
Right. Yeah, I remember 100 trillion, then it worked its way down to 60, and now we're in the mid 40s. How do you offload trillions of dollars of crap without it affecting other areas in the market, Jim? That's one of the questions I had is, well, where the fuck did it go? Please tell us. It won't.
Just some rough figures. It's impossible to get exact figures. Some rough figures. I think the Fed is churning out something on the order of $4, $5, $8, $10 trillion a month to cover derivatives.
Wow.
They're looking to see what are the points of eruption. Let's fix that. How much does it cost? Oh, $2 trillion this month. There are some audits that have been done. They're not popular, publicized audits, but there's some figures that are floated. I shouldn't say floated. I don't like that word. That are estimated and revealed that the Fed and the Wall Street banks and the U.S. government have been doing well over $1 trillion a month for a long time. And I think these are real low estimates I think it's like, as I said, 4, 6, 8, 10 trillion a month. Look at it this way. About 4 years ago or 3 years ago, the Saudis stopped being completely dollar denominated, and we're not recycling as much as before. Okay, this coincided with a lower oil price. And you could make a conclusion that they were walking away from the petrodollar derivative complex. The petrodollar is not just this standard that it's like a cloud. No, it's a structural entity with treasury bonds, the dollar, the euro, the British pound, the IMF currencies tied in with oil and the debts from those nations. And it's all a mass structure. And I argued that as of 2015-16, it was getting dismantled. Okay, the voice would make comments to me. He said, Jim, the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to have a dismantling of the petrodollar complex of derivatives, and it's going to be very messy, not well publicized, but huge impact all over the place. Okay, fine. Those are
you talking about that 3, 4 years ago, maybe, how the petrodollar system was going to be taken apart. We're going to go to the gold standard of some sort. It's going to be developed, and this is all happening, Jim. So the triggers, Deutsche Bank, D-Bank is one of the triggers. The oil system is one of the triggers. What else have you got?
Well, you mentioned the oil. I'm going to mention it too. I'm going to mention it in more trade specifics.
Okay.
I mentioned it before in terms of the derivative and the de facto standard, where the Arabs and the OPEC nations, by the way, OPEC is dead. Let it be known, OPEC is dead. They meet, but they're not meeting to talk about oil. Okay. This is a funny little reality question, John. But why do the OPEC ministers meet in Vienna once a year? They don't have anything. They don't have any agenda that they agree on. Right. They don't have any. Pardon me?
They don't cooperate with each other anymore. They don't abide by the terms.
It used to be that Saudi would lead the way and make an accord and the rest would disobey. Now you have the fringe making accords with Russia and the Saudis disobeying. Then finally Russia comes to visit with the double who's masquerading as King Salman. Yeah. King Salman is either dead or just drooling at the mouth without any recognition of where he is. Okay, now the Russians are going to Saudi. Okay, to make deals and firm up the whole policy regarding oil as having moved away from the dollar. Mm-hmm. So why do the OPEC ministers go to Vienna?
I have no clue what that
Well, they want a vacation from the sun, and yeah. It is the prime prostitution center of Europe.
Yeah, they need more sun. They don't have enough in Saudi Arabia.
Well, they're looking for, open pastures, shall I say. And they pay up. I mean, like 10 grand a shot.
It's party time, in other words.
It's party time, and they get tired of, let me just leave that alone. Okay, you get the idea. Yes. Okay, I made a forecast for the 2017 September Vienna OPEC meeting. I said not a single thing will be agreed upon, but they'll all walk away smiling. Okay, it's because they had fun.
Right.
Okay, now, and I concluded OPEC is dead. And here we are 2 years later, and it's pretty darn clear that the standard for oil, output, pricing, contracts and all, is set by Russian Rosneft. Oh yeah. They're the new oil cartel. And here's how it works. Okay, this is a break point. I'm going to get to my point of how it breaks down in a minute. I got my note. Why would Russia buy Iranian oil? Russia's the #1 producer. Why does Russia buy Iranian oil?
Well, I think they want to support Iran. I think they need it for blending purposes. And I also think they want to put the hurt on the U.S. oil market.
Exactly.
That's what I think.
Exactly. Let me fill out a couple others. They want to assure that Iran has adequate liquidity for their entire economy. Now, let's leave aside that the mullahs are criminals. Let's leave that aside.
Yeah, leave that aside.
They've got tremendous wealth hidden in Swiss banks. The Ayatollah Khomeini and his gang are tremendous criminals with hidden accounts. Khomeini lived in Paris for years and set up his connection. Then finally he came home, and all the mullahs got their bank accounts or slush funds in Swiss banks. Okay. Iran is suffering from sanctions from the United States. And Russia comes in and says, we'll buy your oil. They're the biggest producer. Why are they buying anybody's oil?
Right.
It's like, oh gosh, it's like, well, why? Buying cell phones from Apple. Are you kidding me? Okay.
Right, yeah.
This is reverse flow. Now, you mentioned blending, and that's very important. I don't believe Iran has tremendous blending issues. Okay. Venezuela does.
Venezuela really does, yes.
They've got the heavy, thick Orinoco. I know how it's spelled, but I don't know how it's pronounced. Orinoco, heavy oil. So the Russians buy Venezuelan oil, and they mix it with lighter, sweet crude, and they can make it marketable. Okay, why does Russia buy Saudi oil? Because we're cutting them off at the knees. That's why we're stealing their bonds. We're provoking tremendous liquidity problems. They've already got liquidity problems from a lower oil price, and we stole their treasury.
Yes.
We stole their treasury bonds. Okay, treasury is a loose term, meaning their bank account, their hidden war chest. We stole their war chest.
And this is why Saudi Arabia is going to Russia for weapons and going to China for oil sales. And they're going to be willing to trade in the Chinese yuan. And they're just going to bypass the US dollar. The dollarization's going on. And what a mess.
What a mess. Okay. Now, remember the Holy Grail deal, $230 billion multi-year, 20-year deal with Russia and China? That was about 4 years ago. Okay, $230 billion. Okay, they completed the major portion of the pipeline. It's called the Power of Siberia pipeline, or just the Siberian pipeline. And it was all funded with treasury bonds. Okay, the irony is incredible. The non-dollar movement that is afoot is funded largely with treasury bonds. Construction projects funded by treasuries that China's dumping. I don't think they've got much left. I think they swapped a lot of it out.
They spent it all in their other development projects around the world. China hasn't.
They spent a lot, but they swapped a lot, John.
Okay.
They've got contracts where they say, we've got these $300 billion in treasury bonds, and we're going to swap it for euros, and we want access to the euros. And you say, Deutsche Bank, you run that risk on the swap. They've dumped their treasuries in contractual form, not in a spending form.
Okay.
They've eliminated their risk. Okay, suppose you've got a bank account and you've got $50,000 in euros, 50,000 euros, and you don't want that risk. So you sign a contract with a big-ass broker, and you say, I want it to be half gold and half dollars, but I don't want any more euro risk. Because I don't like the Yellow Jacket movement. I don't like the burning of Notre Dame. I don't like the disobedience of leadership in the EU. I don't like anything that's going on in Europe. So you sign a contract. Maybe it's with Goldman Sachs. And you get rid of your 50,000 euro ownership commitment risk. Okay, you mentioned that the Saudis are selling oil to China. Okay, in the Aramco bond market disclosure procedure a month ago, it became known through the disclosure process. You can't do a bond issuance without a transparent disclosure procedure.
Right.
It was revealed that the Aramco balance sheet had over $1 billion of RMB Chinese currency, more than the British pound and the yen combined. And nothing was on that balance sheet a year ago.
Oh, 100 billion in 1 year?
No, 1 billion.
1 billion, okay.
Yeah, 1 billion. 1 billion. Okay. We think in terms of trillions when you get to the national level, so you got to be careful.
Right.
This is a balance sheet of a company, and it's their savings account. So they've got hundreds of billions in sales.
Right.
Hundreds of billions in costs. Norwegian and other contractors, who, by the way, they're not paying. They're not paying. So they're leaving. Remember what the voice said. The Saudis are broke. What part of this is confusing? We stole their savings account when the oil price got cut in half. And their cost structure is increasing because they need to pacify the rebellious population. Okay, so the point is that from the Aramco bond disclosure procedures, it is now known that they've got Chinese RMB on their balance sheet in their savings ledger. They're selling oil to China and taking RMB, period.
Yes.
This is not in dispute anymore. It's not in the U.S. press ever. It's in the Hattrick letter.
Oh, very good. Well, let's take a quick little break from the subject matter while you mention the hat trick at golden-jackass.com. That is where you have subscriptions, you have information that you share, and also there's a donate button there, Jim. And what I want to say is I owe you a great debt of gratitude, because years ago I started listening to you, and it's taken years for a lot of things to develop, and I go, holy cow, Jim really helped me out, and I want to help you out. You've got a donate button, you've got a site there. Can you tell us a little bit about it? What's going on? And I want to encourage everyone in the Prepared Mind Network, go check out golden-jackass.com. And if you got some ducks, throw them Jim's way. He does marvelous research and gets us ahead. If you want to be prepared, right, and be prepared ahead of time, Jim is key in helping us do that. And a lot of information he's spoken about has developed. I've seen it come true, and I incorporate that into what I talk about in the show, how to get ready, what's coming, etc. So Jim, go ahead and let us know a little bit about your site there, and then we'll get back into some other details.
It's got 15 years now, John.
Yes.
When I started this, I was, not exactly a young man, and I'm definitely not a young man anymore. I still got a lot of energy. I'm collecting Social Security. Been collecting for over a year, and I got my questions about how long that's going to continue. There's going to be some reform. Anyway, about 3 or 4 years ago, I lined up a bunch of forecasts, and they have been explained. Not every forecast in every monthly report issued and published. It's a downloadable report. People get a login, and they use it, and they download the report. And some people have difficulty. I send them the MS Word file, but starting about 2014-15, I came up with a whole group of forecasts that I thought were going to take time, and I explained them. 4 or 5 forecasts get delineated and explained with every new report. Here's some of the major ones that are all seeming to kick into gear now after a few years. The gold trade note is being launched for oil trade sales. Germany is flipping east. The defiance is incredible. China is buying Saudi oil in RMB terms. We see it in the Aramco balance sheet. The U.S. is tossing the Saudis under the bus. We're stealing $3 trillion minimum. Trillion, $3,000 billion worth of treasury bonds. The U.S. reverts to infinite QE forever. Powell announced the forever part 2 months ago. He called it standard policy. It means we cannot find adequate bond investors. The infinite part is coming because we're going to monetize Boeing, and we're going to monetize at least one Wall Street bank while we reduce interest rates. The U.S. Treasury bond is recognized as a global subprime bond. All the errors that went into mortgage bonds went into the Treasury bond. We figured it's too big to fail, can never fail. It is now failing. It is now failing. The Treasury bond is now erupting. The bond market has a crisis. We'll talk about more of the triggers in a minute. Numerous non-dollar bank facilities, non-dollar transfer facilities will emerge. We're seeing it. You mentioned the Instex. We're going to get to that. I put it in my notes. We're not going to forget that one. Okay. The Chinese have their own. It's the Chinese interbank payment system. It's a rival to SWIFT. The Russians have one. They use it with their former Soviet republics, their neighbor nations. And now the Germans have Instex for direct oil payments with Iran. Britain is seeking a role in the Belt and Road Initiative. This was not in people's frontal lobe 2 years ago. Now the
Right.
British see that Frankfurt is going to be an RMB competitor, RMB trading hub competitor for panda bonds and currency. Iran becomes a vital member of the Eurasian trade zone. It's going to be Russia, China, Iran, and India. And they're going to attract the Europeans. I call it the Eurasian trade zone. It's often called the Eurasian Economic Union. I don't need another EU. The
You
United
got
States is EU. The United States is Estados Unis. It's Estados Unidos, EU. The European Union is EU. We don't need a Eurasian Economic Union. They're actually calling it the EUCU. Anyway, I call it Eurasian Trade Zone. It's going to be gigantic, and it's going to be very non-Orwellian. By that I mean it's not going to be dominated by the British and Oceania.
right.
Orwell talked about Oceania versus Eurasia. And Oceania gave us the Soviet Union, by the way. It was a London and Rothschild construct. Steal the Russians' gold, introduce communism to their country, keep them in the deep freeze for a century, and now they're coming out of it and we sanction them for no cause. Okay. Another one, U.S. loses control of the oil market as OPEC dissolves. I got more to say on that coming up. Here's one of my favorite topics. It's the dual universe comes into form. The West with the dollar and the East with the Chinese RMB. Now, you cannot have a dual universe without a frontier with friction. And the friction is going to be Saudi, Iran, Germany, and Venezuela. Major friction already seen. We're seeing it now. Correct forecast coming into view. Dual universe. Shanghai gradually wrests control of the gold market. That is something in progress, and it cannot be stopped because their physical volume is something like 10 to 20 times the London physical volume. Next one. The U.S. bond market unravels as crisis expands. We're seeing now just way too many corporate bonds falling into the triple B category, qualifying as fallen angels, and a bunch of them are becoming zombies, which means that they don't have enough cash flow to manage their debt service.
Right. Yeah.
It's all coming unraveled. The general U.S. bond market is becoming a crisis center, and it's going to include the treasuries. And lastly, the U.S. is finding utter isolation. Boy, was that evident at the Tokyo G20. The U.S. really got pulled aside and was read the Riot Act. And the result of it was Trump backed down on the Huawei trade friction. Okay, so all these things are coming to the fore right now, John, and it's exciting, but it's also scary, dangerous.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And for me personally, it's gotten to be an overload of stress and occasional depression. This is difficult to talk about, but it needs to be talked about because I'm soliciting help. What's happened to me is I've been here 12 years and I've done a number of little things. Like a room addition, so 2 little kids can have their own bedroom. It went well. Got invested in a vehicle parts business. Became a crime scene. I was a small silent owner. Not me, but somebody I know. And became a crime scene and cost an absolute bundle to resolve. Took 2 years to resolve. Bought a little property. Just wanted something on the side. I've got income. I wanted something on the side, and title fraud. Did something else with a little condominium. Contractor fraud with a water contractor. Fraud is all over the place in Costa Rica. People think of it as, paradise. It's a paradise for weather, jungles, and beaches if you can stay away from the sewage. Half their beaches are very lovely, and half, obviously, are not. Whenever there's a lawyer in the room, there's a 50% chance of fraud. I was victimized in my first residence application. An attorney stole $3,000, did absolutely nothing. I had to hire another attorney to find out that he had done absolutely nothing in 18 months.
Wow.
So I had to pay a second time the $3,000. The water contractor fraud cost a bundle. The property title fraud cost a bundle. The vehicle parts silent partnership with the crime scene cost 5 times more than the others as a bundle. There are other things. There's earthquake damage. You know, my gal's mother has had her almost all of her plumbing destroyed by an earthquake. It's a few $1,000s. I'm looking at the wall because that's where I've got the list. I had a little venture for a small business here, a retail business, and it just erupted into a mess. The government changed the rules on insuring employees. So what we thought was going to be a profit month, it turned out to be a standard monthly loss. Finally sold it, the economy went south, lost the majority of the investment. Okay, the point is that whenever there's paperwork here in Costa Rica, the paradise nation with wonderful weather and wonderful beaches and wonderful jungles and wonderful vegetables and wonderful fruit and many, many wonderful people, whenever paperwork is involved, whether it's a government or attorneys, a lot of fraud. I can honestly say that out of 20 American friends, the majority have suffered attorney fraud.
Wow.
I lived for 55 years in the United States, and I can honestly say that I did not know of one single property title fraud case or one single attorney fraud case. Not one single case. Yet I've suffered about 6 cases here. And I've got over 10 friends who've each suffered attorney fraud. They don't clean up anything here.
Wow.
The same guy who victimized me for the residence fraud, and you know, he just gave me a sheet of paper, or a little platija, they call it. It's a checklist. He said, Jim, you got this, you got this, you got this, you got this, you got just more, 3 more. Faltan tres más. Y éxito. No, you just need 3 more and you got a success. No, I hired for $50 another attorney, and she told me, you don't have a damn thing. What you've got is a submission to obtain the checklist. He bought a checklist for $3,000, pocketed the money, and did the same thing to 12 other people, and he's still doing it.
No disbarring, huh?
There's no disbarring in the College of Attorneys.
No sanctions.
They call it the Colegio de Abogados, the College of Attorneys.
Ah.
I actually talked with a different attorney. He said, Jim, you know, I will do this free for you because you're kind of my friend. You're a friend of... It's funny. When he was a boy 20 years ago, his babysitter was my gal's aunt. So he said, Jim, I'll do a retrieval. We might be able to get $1,500 or $2,000 back from your $3,000 lost, because there's a procedure now, because it's happened so much.
Right.
And I said, they don't disbar the attorney, they just recover some money. He said, basically, yeah. I said, so he's still doing it. I hear he's still doing it. I was actually told that the guy was giving a kickback to my friend. I don't trust Americans here. I'll be very open.
I've heard you say that before.
I probably had about 20 friends here, and I keep up with about 8 or 9 or 10. I consider half of them to be drunks, idiots, or here to do their swindling. I had a friend swindled me on a business venture that was non-existent. Why did I do it? Jim, you're a smart guy. Why do you do these things? I thought I could be careful, but I can't be careful with title fraud so easily. I can't be careful with a good, reliable company for construction of a condominium when they hire a corrupt subcontractor. And now they got a lawsuit against them. The costs I hate to admit it, but and it's humbling, John. It's humbling. But I've gotten over the humility part several months ago,
Right.
with just a couple tearful days, a couple screaming matches,
Right.
deep fear at 3 a.m, waking up in the middle of the morning, worried, sick. The losses are well into the six figures.
Wow.
I don't want to talk about too many details, but I gave you an idea on a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And I've got some debt right now. I cannot pay back my brother because I'm working to end the bleeding on past losses. And I will say this, that when I began talking about the pedophiles 2 years ago with some details of their activity regarding kids, a lot of this stuff erupted simultaneously. And you can't prove anything. I mean, I talked to a couple of my jackass colleagues that say, Jim, wow, that seems like a pretty interesting, strong, spiritual, evil link. Talked to a couple others, said, Jim, you made bad decisions. And I did make a couple bad decisions. And I don't know. I can't prove anything. But after seeing an eruption of a septic tank, just think shit everywhere. And a car crash that killed a client with money owed. And it happened the same week. I thought, oh my gosh, this is too much. So I was talking to a different jackass colleague who's very fluent in statistical parlance, terminology. And he said, Jim, this seems like way more than 3 standard deviations from the normal of regular shit storms in Costa Rica. And I said, golly, you think it's linked to how I talk openly about the pedos and their, hot dogs and pizza and killing kids? Jim, I don't know. But why don't you stop?
Yeah. Well, that's,
so I've stopped. I've let other people talk about it. I'm not going to give any more details. The general terms. Epstein was just arrested, and I don't know what that's going to turn into for Lolita Island. What do you think that's going to turn into?
It depends on how real the investigation is coming from the Trump administration, the Attorney General, whether they're going to just put Epstein away or whether they're going to take all of his extortion bribery material he supposedly got off the Lolita Express on this island. Are they going to actually go in and do something? Well, that would be a sea change in direction.
I think there are going to be 2 or 3 high-profile names that go down.
And then they'll stop, or they'll keep going?
I don't think they'll ever stop. I think they'll always threaten to continue. Okay, we saw names of Branson, Virgin Airlines. Mm-hmm. There's names of
Clinton.
Oh gosh,
Clinton.
Huh?
Bill Clinton.
Oh, sure. The main names, but Trump is also on the list. Yeah. We don't know how Trump might have fallen into temptation. Sometimes this has happened to a couple friends of mine here. They say, Jim, I just met Bernardina. She's incredible. And I go, oh, calm down. What are you talking about here? And then she walked by, and I go, oh my gosh, how old is she? And he said, she says she's 19. And I said, if she's 16, would you know the difference?
Right.
And he said, oh gosh, I hope not. And I said, oh, he did the deed. And he said, well, Costa Rica is a strange place. They falsify IDs. Yeah, As I said, all the paperwork is subject to fraud. Okay, imagine you're an attorney, and you can just alter the paperwork, and a guy gives you $1,000.
Right.
You alter the paperwork, and this happened to my first friend. I forgot about my friend Gary. He was my first friend here in 2007. He was a great guy. He was strong. He was handsome. He was bilingual. He helped me with the Spanish in my first year. He had me over to his house in the first year. It was just like a mile walk. And I thought, that's a nice walk. I'll meet you for lunch. He said, sure, I'll make you lunch here. He was a victim of 3 consecutive frauds in 5-year period, and he committed suicide. My first friend committed suicide. This is a dangerous place. I'm working my ass off to be careful. I'm limiting all investments. I'm trying to be extraordinarily dutiful in monitoring the paperwork, getting the receipts, seeing the documents. It's extremely difficult in Costa Rica. I've had about 20 clients ask me, John, what's it like living in Costa Rica? And I say, well, do you want the 3-minute answer, the 30-minute answer, or the 3-hour answer? Right. They say, well, start with the 3 minutes. So I give them the 3 minutes. They go, why don't you make it continue? So I continue. You cannot write a book about the fraud in Costa Rica. You cannot do that.
It just sounds traumatizing, Jim. It sounds traumatizing.
No, that's not the risk. I would love to do it and sell a bunch and make some income. A fellow in Nicaragua in 2005 and 6 and 7 did a newsletter about the Sandinista corruption in Nicaragua. They murdered his girlfriend, threw him in jail, implicated him, and he had to buy his way out for $30,000. Okay, you don't do things like that.
Right, right.
If you try to play a paperwork game against their paperwork scam, they will nail you. So what I do is I chalk it up to experience. I suck it in. I try to make up for it, and I be careful. And I'm not able to overcome these losses. That's why I set up a donate button. I've said far more than is what on the drop-down description, what I call it. If you click on why donate @ under the donate yellow button, you'll get my description. And if you write me an email like contact us, I'll answer it. If I notice exactly what it is. Many people have already, the donate button's been working for a week, John, and it's worked out pretty well. I'm happy with it. I don't check every hour like an idiot, but it's working out well, and small and large. I actually have a number of pretty well-off friends who are subscribers, and a couple have helped me out. They're Christians. One has overcome some other problems in his life and his daughter's life. And he said, Jim, I help people who are in a jam, and I'm able to, and I will. So that's coming. I encourage people, especially those who like the message, and especially those who've been following my work for years without being a paying subscriber, just hop onto the donate button and make a donation. And if you want to ask questions, fine. I'll try to answer them. I don't go into too much detail, not for the embarrassment, but I like to remain safe in my following years.
Well, I'd like to see, see how much we can help you out. I know everyone should. You've helped everyone out so much, Jim, with your insights, your research. I call it a mission. And we want you to continue to do it, Jim. I don't want you to get stuck in a position where you can't do your job, which is getting the hat trick letter out.
There's a risk. Right now, there's a risk. And the lousy economy is not resulting in a growing client base. Right. But I think this erupting bond market crisis will bring in the as we call it, the new order flow. My dad had an expression. My father is a retired American literature professor. And, we kid around a lot. He said, Jim, you're a writer and I'm a writer. You give lectures and I give lectures. And we don't have anything in common. And I said, yeah, I know, but I do use metaphors, Dad. And he said, do you mix your metaphors, Jim? And I said, sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Like a lit fuse is a volcanic eruption point. You don't mix metaphors like that. You don't do that. You light the fuse to have a whole warehouse full of dynamite explode, and that's the U.S. bond market. So my dad used to tell me, Jim, I don't make a lot of money as a professor, and I don't know anybody who does. I said, I know, you got to go to the engineering department or the law school to find the well-paid professors, right? And he said, you wouldn't believe it. They get like double or triple the salary from arts and sciences. Jim, I'm on a mission. My career is a mission. My career is a mission to understand literature, to interpret the symbolism, and to enjoy the imagery, and and just all the different themes of good versus evil. And I said, yeah, Dad, I'm on a mission too. And you were in World War II in London, and I'm in World War III, which is financial, to preserve the king dollar. And I'm at risk. And they said, how are you at risk? I said, Dad, I got my life threatened in 06 twice.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the same group. Well, one was the Swiss bankers, and one was their affiliate on the northeast corner of the Mediterranean. Their security agency, the M boys. I call them mass wipes. But anyway, I'm at risk, and I didn't expect what has happened. I've got people who depend on me. Mm-hmm. I've got, a family regarding the actual newsletter. I've got my own little monkeys and my lady. I got another one that I like to help from time to time. There are a lot of need cases here. Mm-hmm. And I'm a nice guy. I'm a generous guy, but I've had to say no. Like someone asked me a couple of months ago, Jim, can you help me there? I've got, car repair. And, as a friend of the family, friend of an extended family. And I said, I know I helped you 3 years ago, but I can't. I'm sorry, I can't. And he lost his car. There are consequences for not helping those in need who I've enjoyed helping in the past. I helped someone 6 years ago. They were going to lose their home. They were way behind, like 10, 12 months behind on mortgage payments. And they got a foreclosure notice, and I helped them out. Mm-hmm. That was an aunt and uncle of my lady. I don't like mentioning ladies' names. I don't want anybody to get at risk or hurt. But
collectively, hopefully everyone can kind of help out and give and just keep this thing going.
I'm hoping it's a combination of two groups, and they're both large. Mm-hmm. One is jackass followers, as I call it. Jackass wannabes, followers, people who followed my work like you have for years. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many years, 3-4 years. Yeah. Some have been many years. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I was doing it for 2 years before I started the newsletter.
Right.
I had some pretty popular, I had one in 2003. It was an amazing 4-part series. I called it Ass Backward Economics, just to point out how our U.S. economic policy was the backwards. If we really wanted a strong economy, it's all policy being backwards. Okay, so one group is the jackass followers of my work, who, I got a lot of people who say, Jim, I was following your interviews on YouTube and other sites like, Turd Ferguson, and I never really signed up, but I finally signed up. I wish I'd signed up a lot earlier. Okay, there are a lot of people who don't sign up for my newsletter, but who enjoy the benefit of the interviews, and that's fine. Many of them do sign up, and I appreciate that. That's one type of compliment I'd love to get. The other I like is, I was a subscriber of yours until 2015 and, all the Ukraine war, and I thought, this is really messy. But I let 2 years pass, and I signed up again. I wish I'd never left.
Right.
Well, that's wonderful. I love compliments like that. So the one group is the followers of my work who've never signed up for anything, and that's fine. But, hit the donate button. Just send something my way as a token of gratitude. The other group is what I call the Christian Legion. I believe that there's a demonic element to this. It's to silence me, to make me depressed, to just take away my entire desire to continue. But I'm a fighter. I've fought with a lot of things in life. 20 years ago, I fought with something serious. 30 years ago, I fought with something also serious. And I've overcome them and continued. And I'm not going to quit easily. Mm-hmm. I've solicited some help, and I'm going to solicit some more help. The donate button is for the Legion, the jackass followers and the Christian Legion. I got a lady in Europe who's helped me 3 or 4 times, and I'm very grateful to her. I've got a lady who's in the D.C. metro area. She's helped me Very nice gesture. Got another lady in north of Florida, and she helped me. These are Christian, and Christian, all three, and they're sizable help. And some of it goes to clean up the past. Some of it goes to provide me a little nest egg because I've got costs every month, and I'm trying to eliminate all the costs from the past problems and pray like a warrior that I can get protection, divine protection. I'm not talking about bodyguards out front. I'm talking about very serious, high-level spiritual protection that one Christian friend said, Jim, imagine it as a sphere of white light dots.
Yeah.
Little golden speckles. And I said, why golden? Why not silver? You know, we joke around. But anyway, I'm also soliciting larger sponsorship help. The combination of the smaller donate button and the larger sponsorship, I'm hoping will get me through this because I don't want to quit. Yeah. Sometimes I wonder, oh my gosh, in a couple of years, I'll be a mess. I don't know how I can do this. But I also might get that divine hand. And, you know, I'm a Christian. I've been a Christian, a little more serious a Christian since my divorce in 91, which really rocked me hard. You know, no children, but it rocked me in 90 and 91. Damage to the heart, you know what I mean. I loved my wife, even though she wasn't a really good person. Well, let's get back. Okay, go to the site, check out the donate button, read the donate why. It's just more of the same of this. And, you know, I hope people can go to my site, golden-jackass.com, sign up for the newsletter. But if you don't, just make a donation. And
make a donation.
I'm really amazed so far at the first week. Just keep it running, people. This is a jackass cattle drive.
Yeah, we want to do what we can to support you. And like I said, the information you provide, Jim, is stellar. So thank you for coming to the Prepared Mind. And I want to wish you a terrific day, and we'll see what we can do to help you, because you've definitely helped us.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I can't say how much I enjoy interviews. I've always been told, especially by my brother, sister, and father, Jim, you're a blabbermouth.
Well,
and I say, well, I got interesting things to say, Dad. Well, maybe, but I'm bored.
Well, we're glad to hear it.
Well, you're not bored. That's good. That's good. And I hope to see your show again, and I hope your followers grow in number.
Yeah, thank you very much, and you're going to help, and I look forward to talking to you in the future at some point.
Okay, really good. Thanks for having me on. Bye now.
Bye now.